So today's meeting, we're talking completely about community engagement. Before I get started, I want to introduce my coworker, Rowan. Ian, I believe you've interacted with Rowan, but Rowan is going to be coming with me to do the youth engagement program, and he's going to help tonight describe the proposed agenda. So he is here to answer questions and explain things this evening. So thanks for coming tonight, Ron.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So since we have a limited amount of time, I'm just going to jump right in. A brief update for the community survey that went out a couple weeks ago. When I checked earlier today, it had 68 responses. So we have until, I believe it was December 8th. So just under a month, so there's plenty of time. But if the city is doing social media blasts and that sort of thing, it might be a good thing to push that again, especially before the holidays.
I believe so. I believe Jill added.
Okay, and have we done anything in Albion e-news with it?
I think it has been.
I haven't seen it, I don't think.
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Could have been.
We'll make sure.
I owe Christine or Amy the PDF flyer. Christine was just asking for it today so that they can push it out again in their circles. I know we have a fair amount of paper responses, like maybe that many or more already.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't there that other website that community Albion thing? What is it called?
Neighborhood.
Something, I don't know. I've been to good time.
The next door.
Next door, that's what it is, yeah.
Is that something that could be?
Someone could probably post on there. I don't know. I don't
Sure.
have access to that. Or
I don't know that I
part of
can.
it.
You should jump
Mhm.
in. You don't have to post on it, you can join.
Is there a target number of responses you're looking for?
The goal is to get, somewhere between 5 and 10% of the population as for representation. I don't remember off the top of my head.
800?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the goal. It's a pretty lofty goal though. So yeah, but we do have time. And if we get to December 8th and we want to leave it open, there's no reason why we can't. But that was just the date that we decided to have it closed for the survey flyer. Okay, so I'm going to move right to the youth engagement program. This is happening on Tuesday, November 30th. So that's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. It's at Albion College from 7:30 to 9. I sent with your packet a draft agenda. So I think at this point, I might turn it over to Rowan to actually describe the activity a little bit more. I think with an agenda, you may not have gotten a full picture of what that could look like. But I guess before you start, Rowan, we usually like to do a really brief presentation at the beginning, just introductions, and then kind of what is a comprehensive plan? What is this process? Why are you here? What do planners do? Because a lot of times students haven't, and even adults, when we do the adult sessions, don't know those things. So keep a brief presentation, but then get into the program as quickly as possible. So Rowan, do you want to give an overview of what the scenario planning activity is?
Sure. As Liz has probably highlighted, and as you probably know from your experience working with us as a firm, that we really prioritize spatial data and trying to tie things to place as much as we can. So all of our recommendations coming out of master plans are really tied to a specific place, so that when it comes to implementation, those steps are really easy to move forward from the master plan to actual boots on the ground action. And this is what the scenario planning activity is really designed to do. And so we present students with this blank grid. Liz, do you have the booklet open?
Yes. Here we go.
And students are given a booklet, or participants. We've also done this exercise with adults. Most commonly, it's done with students or young adults. And we give them a blank grid that's about 80 cells and a bunch of colored blocks. And in the booklet, the colors correlate to land use. So you'll see that the yellow blocks correlate to single family residential, blue civic institutional, brown high density residential. And we ask participants to design a city that they want to live in. And so through about 15, 20 minutes, they'll place their blocks and, having conversations about orientation, placement, quantities of different land use. And we find this really valuable because not only we get people thinking about land use, but we also get people thinking about orientation. And that's really the helpful thing for us kind of as planners, is to know, from this exercise, we can just see that people really prioritize locating in dense housing near commercial nodes, or dense housing near open space, or dense housing near parks. And so that's the first cut of the exercise. It's kind of just a blank canvas asking people, in your ideal city, what would it look like? And then we move to the second part of the exercise, as if you want to scroll to page 5, 6. We throw a few challenges at them. So as planners, we're always thinking about changing cities, constraints. And so we ask them, your city has to have a certain population. All of the blocks have a certain number of people associated with them. So one brown block represents about 72 people. And so through our iterations of this exercise, that we find that people generally underestimate density. And so through this exercise, where we ask them to hit a certain population, the transition between the first part of the exercise and the second part of the exercise is where we get super valuable data about where people want density to increase. And so they'll have to remove blocks, change blocks, switch blocks around. And we find out really detailed and really valuable information about housing density just through that one constraint there. And then we also ask questions about open space. You need a certain number of civic and institutional buildings. And also, as a general planning principle, you don't want industrial buildings located near residential properties. So we also throw that constraint at them. And so we're applying a few general planning principles to this exercise. And through that iterative process between step 1 and step 2 is where we get a ton of super helpful data that's definitely tied to space as well. And then those findings and recommendations will then translate to a future land use map at the end of the master plan process. I know that was a lot. It's definitely hard to describe when you don't have it in front of you. So does anyone have any questions about that exercise?
How long do you anticipate that takes, and how many people can you walk through that exercise at once, or do you send it home?
Yeah, sure. So generally it's designed to be a group exercise. So we generally target about 5 people to work as a team. And it takes about, the first part of the exercise generally takes a little bit longer because participants have to get used to that exercise and kind of learn what color blocks mean what, and then think about, designing a city from scratch is no easy task. You really have to think through a lot of things, right off the bat. And so that first cut probably takes about 15, 20 minutes. And then that second cut where we throw constraints at them takes about 10 to 15 minutes.
So this is just the first of a series of public engagements, and then this youth perspective is the first one, or are we relying on this to drive our future land use map?
That's a good question. It's somewhat up to you. We recently did a similar activity in a community where we did it with the youth and then did the exact same activity with the adults, and then we're able to compare results. So we could go that way, or with your community input session that will happen later in January, we could do, just part of this and then also some more visioning type things. It's lots of options.
And I do want to, feel free.
Go ahead.
I do want to stress that the findings from this, especially around orientation, don't directly translate to future land use, but it's more of those trends that we see. So, a pretty common finding from this exercise is that people want housing density. When we ask them to increase housing density, they generally increase that housing density near commercial activity. So we then use that finding to translate to recommendations in a future land use map.
Are these Albion College students that will be doing this, or is this any youth?
Yes.
in the
Yes.
city that's able to attend that?
That's a good question that Linda brought up today. The original intent was to be at Albion College, but I think it's up for discussion if we can invite other youth as well.
I mean, I'm not opposed to having it at Albion College. I'm just saying if we're only getting a college student perspective. One, I have an issue that these students don't live here and don't know the city and they don't know what we have and what we don't have and how we, planned stuff already. And while yes, it's a dream city, but how much weight are we putting on this activity to drive our future land use if we weren't even planning to do this with current residents?
So I want to jump in and answer part of that question and George's last question, which is this activity is coming after you talk briefly to whoever we're going to include in the youth involvement. And then kind of closing that out, there's a survey specifically for them as well. So we kind of got there's two things we're getting feedback from them on, and the other part's just kind of introducing them to the topic. And then we had initially settled on leveraging the Albion College Fellows, I believe, because that's a group at the college that are native to Albion and graduated high school to then go on to Albion College. So we wanted to pick that group because we can't just go to the high school in Marshall because we risk getting feedback also from students that don't go there. But I think what Linda had called me about and emailed Liz about was including other youth, not just young adult college students, but I think some of our initial suggestions at the kickoff meeting were Boy Scouts, 4-H, Girl Scouts, church youth groups. So when we start doing that, we get into our youth category is somewhere in the 9 to 20-year-old category. So I think a discussion about which of those groups exist here to be included and how we want to include them.
Well, I agree with what I think Tom's referring to is that I think it would be useful to get multiple population perspectives with this sort of endeavor. Maybe adults also doing it, and because yeah, I mean, especially if you go down to the age of 9, I mean, I'm not sure land use. That's probably going to turn a bunch of 9-year-olds off. Right. I mean, I don't know. They might just build a fort or something.
We have tried a very simplified version of this exercise with second graders, where they had maybe 12 cells to fill out and they had 4 colors of blocks. And I don't think we got super valuable information from that exercise.
So in reaching out, so I want to make sure we get some clear direction on this. Are the ways I suggested the best ways to reach youth in Albion, saying that as someone who did not grow up in Albion? Church youth groups, 4-H, Boy Scouts, does that exist here in a sufficient enough capacity to leverage those resources for youth engagement, or is there a better way to go about that?
Well, first off, I think you have to figure out how young you want to get. I mean, if you have a college student, they're going to be cognizant of a lot of the issues that go into land use planning, and probably few years pre-college. So maybe you want to first figure out how young you want to get. I guess another question that came into my mind is, so are you simply inviting people to show up, or do you have some other method of ensuring that you have a certain number of people at this event?
Typically, we would invite them, but Amy, I'll let you speak on how your students are getting people there.
So we are working with the AC3 team at the college to put this on. They put out a flyer and are working with the fellows, the AmeriCorps, sports, drama, all the different departments trying to get a cross section of representation. So we both get some of the fellows, the people that have been here in the community and not. I think the information that we would get from those that aren't in the community might help when we're trying to attract people to live in the community or keep students after they've left. I will share that they've reserved the Ludington room for November 30th. So that's the space that it's going to be. The concern that I would have if we start to bring in too many other groups is too much variation in age, and that activity might not work the same. Also the timing that was chosen, because we were using college students, we did a 7:30, I think till 9, somewhere in there. Based on that's when they're done with their, sports meetings or whatever else that they've got. They're usually clear on their calendars about 7:30, and we're attracting them with snacks and things. So, the 2 students that reviewed this, that are part of the AC3 team, had some concerns about the activity, that it was maybe a little bit, I don't know, childish is the word that's coming to mind, but it's probably because I'm tired tonight. However, this isn't a group of students that are doing this activity in place of their class in high school. It's students coming after a day of school and a day of activity and giving their private time. So we just want to make sure it's we get some valuable data from it, however it's done. And they're working hard to make sure that there is a cross section of students that come to it. So we're working with a lot of the college leadership to work on that.
So I don't mean to sound pessimistic, but my experience has been when Albion College students or probably applies to any college students, when they're invited to an occasion like this, a youth engagement program for land use or something like that. You may not get the turnout that you might expect. And also, given the fact that this will be the second to last week of the semester.
That's the weekend before exams.
Yeah, so I think, I'm just being honest. What happens sometimes is professors will say, hey, you'll get some credit for showing up to this talk. And they get some people to show up to the talk, and it's good. Or they do something else. I don't know what they do, but they're not necessarily going to have this at the top of their list for that evening.
Well, and I'll add to that, the 2 students that reviewed it have that same concern. All of their activities are having less attendance because of COVID. People just aren't interested in doing the after hour, after school, after time activities. So they also share that same concern that, not understanding exactly what our goal is to have there. They were still concerned that we might not hit that.
And you might loop in things like Ford and Gerstacker, because they have a cadre of students, and they have some mechanism for keeping track of, oh yeah, you went to this, you went to that. You might want to do that because, this land use idea is broad enough to probably bring in public policy on the one side and business in the other. Just a suggestion.
No, those groups are definitely involved. Vicki Baker is the head of the AC3. So she works closely with the institutes. So the institutes are part of and EDC works with the institutes pretty closely. So they're definitely involved in us trying to encourage student involvement.
What is AC3?
Albion College Community Collaborative. I believe it's going to be within the old bank building. Right now, it's teams of students at different levels of college that work on real life problems for businesses. So we're using them for the economic development strategic plan this year. They're going to work on writing that. So for this semester, they're working on the public engagement and then a results page for the EDSP. The second semester, they're going to come back and actually do the writing of the EDSP.
So Amy,
As far as,
go ahead.
as far as the engagement, understanding that we're probably going to receive significantly less of that, and that perhaps we are obliged to weight that significantly less than the engagement we're getting from adults in the community. In my view, this is sufficient for the current purposes. I think all along the lines of getting into the habit of doing this every 5 years, which I think starting like this, seeing how this one goes, if we're doing what we are legally obligated for, staying in compliance with the state to do, I'm not saying I want to do the bare minimum, but if we're doing it right, let's see how it goes and work on doing more in the future. We can do it more frequently than 5 years. There's no limit to how often we can survey them, and coming back and doing something like this in a year and a half and see these are the results from the 8 people that did this.
That makes sense. It just, I think we should go in with our eyes wide open.
Sure, I appreciate that.
Amy, were there the students that you were working with, did they have specific things that they wanted to have during this program, or are they just more concerned that people aren't going to show?
Well, there was, naturally the concern about the people not showing, but their main concern was that they're going to entice people to come. They're going to use their persuasive powers to get friends and others to share it, so we can get a good cross section, and then those people will feel like maybe it's not a good use of their time, and which is not what we want to do. We want to make sure young adults are engaged with government. And the way that Rowan explained this, I think we can still get some good data. I think maybe a little bit more on the survey or a little bit more on some feedback, so they feel like they're actively part of the process instead of just doing an activity and then going on to taking a survey. That's class.
Sure. And then, I mean, we haven't even gotten to the second part of the program, which would be, and this is also for the purposes of COVID, to be a little bit more spread out in an in-person activity, but just to have maps throughout the room where people can mark and write notes about what they think their strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities are. So there'd be a map of Albion, and people can have stickers, and then there's a sheet with correlating numbers where people can write as many notes as they would like. So do we have any further questions or comments about this? We certainly want it to be a worthwhile activity, so that's why we're bringing it to you for feedback.
It kind of reminds me of the Settlers of Catan game.
I do love that game.
I will say that we have gotten pretty good feedback on this exercise due to that tactile nature and more of that interactive element. Because along with building their city, the participants are also calculating, jobs and population. So there's kind of an interesting feedback between how a city is built and what the demographic impact is. And we have found that there are interesting conversations that happen between, group members as they're doing this exercise, and we jot notes down about those conversations as well.
I'm not sure that this is the right age group, but the big read would be another potential group of folks to tap, at least if not the current class, some of the older kids, because they, Jess Roberts and Nels Christensen would be able to turn out folks, and they're a younger crowd, but they're very knowledgeable of the community.
What was the name of that group again?
Albion's Big Read, and 2 Albion College faculty members had that up.
The ad committee at the foundation would be good too.
Yep.
Youth advisory committee is made up of high school and students from town, and they the foundation, and they have the responsibility of granting funds to various groups around town, and they're very, very astute group right there. And they're vested in the community.
Could you two send whoever you know that is connected to that, just write like an email address of that person to is, I think at some point is.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes. And Amy, should they get in touch with you? Are you the contact?
I would refer them to Liz. I don't know if we could, I mean, I don't know the ages of the Big Read. Haven't been that involved with it, but I mean, I don't see why we couldn't invite them to the same night. And the Ludington is large, so we can separate the tables, and we could have. It might be interesting to see what college kids come up with, and then what the Big Read the kids come up with. So, but Rowan, I don't know that I understand fully how this information is going to be captured. So, can you talk a little bit about that? What are we going to get out of this, and how is it going to be given to the steering committee to help lead our process?
Sure. So during the exercise, we take photos of the exercise as it's happening, and then we'll bring those photos in and analyze them as a team, as planners. We're trained, we look at land use patterns all day long, 8 hours, 40 hours a week. And so through that kind of analysis that we do after the exercise is over, we come up with a bulleted list almost of here are popular themes or land use trends that we saw during the exercise. Some popular themes that we've found doing this exercise before are housing density near commercial centers, or neighborhoods with large percentage of green space, or mixed housing neighborhoods where you have a bunch of different housing types in the same neighborhood. And so it's those patterns that we're looking at, and then we bring to the steering committee and the master plan and incorporate where relevant. Did that answer your question, Amy?
Yeah, I think so. I wasn't a part of the the process that the community went through to do land use. I just know from my position that we went through that process, and it makes it much easier to develop certain properties that we've got. So I guess I'm a little cautious about what outcomes will come out of this, and will it be beneficial to this group? And I'd leave it to those that were part of that planning process before.
You remember how we determined the future land use? During the last one, on this committee that were part of that last one. I don't recall off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look at it.
That wasn't the session that we had at the firehouse. We had the different boards. People.
It might be,
came in and
yeah,
had the
it
stickers.
might be something similar to that, yeah.
Okay, I think
With that. Okay.
So, hey, Rowan or Liz, do you guys have a sample of some of the results you've gotten when you've done this exercise before, that just to maybe show us what other groups have maybe come up with when they completed this exercise?
Sure, I'm happy to share you a photo of what's happened with the exercise. I'm not entirely sure that I can share the write-up as the results because our client hasn't seen that yet. So I don't want to share those results when the client hasn't had a chance to review, but I'm happy to share a photo and then do just, kind of an in-time analysis from that photo of what we would do in the office, kind of an analysis of that exercise. So Liz, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen.
We're gonna accidentally start a feud between us and some other small city.
So this is, oops, apologies. I was trying to rotate the photo.
Make a little mini version of this and make it.
So this is an exercise we did. Can everyone see the photo?
Yes.
Okay. And so this is an exercise we did identical to the one we're proposing in Albion, and students had the opportunity. This is after the second cut, so after we've given them some constraints. And so the main thing, first thing that jumps out to me as a planner, Liz, feel free to jump into if you feel like I've missed anything, but right now, all the industrial buildings are separated away from the main development of the city. So that tells me that the participants did not want industrial properties or development to happen near industry. They wanted a significant buffer between industrial, like an industrial concentration from the rest of the community. That's the primary thing that jumps out to me. And then if you look kind of on the bottom part of the exercise, you see a lot of these yellow blocks that are spaced out pretty evenly. And what jumps out to me here is that these participants wanted primarily single family neighborhoods without a mix of housing mixed into them. So, probably traditional, potentially suburban or a little bit denser housing, single family housing with centralized public spaces. So green space, civic, institutional, scattered throughout those neighborhoods. And then when you look at the commercial, the purple are mixed use, brown, high density residential. And so this land use pattern tells me that the participants actually want a density away from the center of their commercial. So they're putting density in the periphery, which is generally not something we expect. And generally that's flipped, where you put density in the center and maybe lower density as you move out. But that's another thing that stands out from that exercise.
That's interesting, to see that, just see an example of what it looks like, but from an OCD standpoint, it's bothersome.
What move a few of them?
Yes.
I tell you what it makes me think about is our industrial parks, right? The one we have that is within the city limits and not the 425 property we're going to be developing is actually fairly buffered from residential with the mixed use zoning on Austin Avenue. But the 425 property, we're granted that in that all that is between here and what will be the second industrial park is field in the township. So
What does white represent?
It's white's open space, yeah. And so a potential recommendation that would come out of this exercise, let's see, we saw this pattern repeated over and over where the industrial was separated. If industrial is mixed into an already developed area, obviously we can't just up and move that because there's adequate infrastructure in place. But if buffers aren't present in your zoning ordinance, if you don't have screening requirements, vegetative screening, or even large enough setbacks, those are recommendations that we would make to change and kind of incorporate this feedback from the exercise.
So seeing this makes me feel better about the exercise. Thank you.
Thanks, Rowan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. In the interest of time, I think I might move us on, but does anybody have any final comments about the youth engagement? It is coming up pretty quickly with the holiday, the Thanksgiving holiday. So, okay. So Amy, maybe you and I can be in contact later on this week about communicating with the AC3 students and some of the logistics for that.
Okay, I have a meeting with them tomorrow at 10. If you want to join, I'll send you the link.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, the second, so this is the community engagement for this project is pretty big. So we have the survey, we have the youth engagement, then there's also a stakeholder meeting, which I believe you had the last time that you did the plan. And we had in your current plan, there's a list of stakeholders that were engaged at the last time. I know we don't have time to go through this whole list, but with everybody's input, we need to know who you would like to be there and from this list and which of these are no longer relevant, if there are ones missing. I put in red here, like it says local businesses. We would obviously need specifics on who those local businesses would be. So this stakeholder meeting would probably happen after the Christmas, New Year holiday, so early January. But getting to work on this list and contact information is pretty important, just so that people have notice ahead of time. As you're looking at this list, are there any of these that wouldn't be applicable anymore? Okay.
Amy, did Southwest Michigan First change its name? I seem to recall something about that, or it might be something else.
Aware they changed their CEO.
Maybe that's what it was.
Is
It's
America?
also, in the interest of time, I can go through this and verify if the ones that are on there are in existence or not, and then what anyone else can do is bring me the businesses that they see that aren't on there that they should have on there. Your workplaces, your spouse's workplaces, things like that. I'll go through and make sure that everything on there is still current. And then if you have more, you can get that to me and we'll return that to Liz before the end of the week. How's that?
That sounds great. Thank you, Ian.
Can you tell me who the representative for Albion College was before?
It was not in the master plan or in the comprehensive plan that I could see, but I can look again. But I don't think there was a name listed. I think they tried to avoid listing specific names.
Okay, I bring it up because it's a pretty big organization. And we may want a broad scope of representation when you're talking about the college, not just the administration.
Maybe multiple stakeholders there for Albion College.
That's just my suggestion. I don't know.
No, I agree with that. I mean, if they have any kind of faculty body as well as just administration.
Okay, so Ian, you'll take a first pass at this, and then we can send out a draft, and then you can provide edits and additions, deletions on that document.
What about Greater Albion Chamber of Commerce? I don't see them on there.
Greater Albion Chamber of Commerce.
There's quite a few that I would offer, so I'll just send those to you, Ian, and you can decide whether they make the cut or not.
I'll pick yours at random.
Thank you. And then as we're thinking about the actual stakeholders, probably more a question for Ian, but thinking of a location, if this is going to be in person or if we want to do it via Zoom. Either option is okay, but if it is going to be a place, then we would just need to reserve, if needed, a location.
What date are we hoping to have this again?
There isn't a specific date, but probably early January. So maybe that first or second week in January.
I would say we stand a better chance of getting people there if we do it in person.
Okay. Sure.
And I would throw out the Ludington Center, it's just,
Yeah.
that's a large open space.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Then the final community engagement thing is a community visioning session that will likely happen in late January. I don't think there's anything to discuss at this point yet. Just start thinking about a date and again, a location for a theoretically larger group. So in terms of next steps, the first thing on the docket is to finalize the youth engagement program and then obviously have that session on the 30th. And then we've started working on the chapter drafts, or essentially it's a rewrite, it's an update. So using the existing comprehensive plan and updating where applicable. As discussed with Ian and Haley, the goal is to make it as user-friendly, graphic as possible. People aren't going to read, a 200-page document, so we are looking to shorten and make the key points as clear as possible. So that's the approach we're taking. The next steering committee meeting, we'll start reviewing chapters. So you meet the third Tuesdays of the month. Will there be any conflicts with like holiday things for the next month?
Third Tuesday of December is December 21st, and we have not had any communication yet about changing that or canceling that meeting. So
Okay.
I will catch heat because that's my fiance's birthday, but I say full steam ahead on still meeting that day.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Do you want to push it up a week?
I'm fine pushing it up a week and doing it earlier, but I don't want to ask the commission to just make that change for. I realize it is the week of Christmas and that maybe people have travel plans.
I guess would you guys, the 14th, would the 14th work better for the next steering committee?
I have no conflicts that day. So I will reach out to the planning commission individually or at large and yeah.
I was just talking about the steering.
The steering committee itself, yeah.
And then depending on, I guess, what business we have for planning commission. Will dictate.
I will circle back to you on that one, Liz, once we get our ducks in a row.
Either date works. I just need to know a little bit in advance so I can get you your packets a week in advance so you have time to review them. Okay, I know you have a meeting in 9 minutes, so does anybody have any final questions, comments for tonight? All right. What's that?
Thank
Look forward to the
Thank you.
30th and have a good Thanksgiving holiday.
Yeah, you all as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Ron.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for your input today.